My name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
And welcome to episode 20 of Let's Get To It.
Yes.
And this is our year in review, which is, or our 6 months in review. We've been at this for 6 months.
Right.
So Mujib and I are going to do a little bit of reflecting and kind of taking a look back, maybe reliving some of the greatest hits on the podcast. But more importantly, this is just going to be, freestyle. Yeah. Free-flowing conversation, which I think is what we do best.
Totally. And I think it's kind of even the theme of 2020 is like just go direct the way that you go with the flow, but you're gonna have to go with it for the most part. Like the river is raging and we're in the river. Yeah. And what I have control over is if I can keep my head above it or try to make my way to one side of it or the other side of it. But if I can find an eddy and we can stop and have a conversation, that's pretty great. But for the most part, we're just going to go with the flow as we go.
I love that. And, it's something I used to talk about when I would teach my in-person spin classes. I would talk about the power of going with the flow and adaptation and how important it is as a skill to be able to adapt to any scenario or situation. And certainly all my shapeshifters out there, if you are good at adapting, then you are weathering the storm here. But there's also light at the end of the tunnel, which is, I'm super hopeful for 2021.
Totally.
So, it's all good.
Yeah. And I think in so many ways, personally, and this isn't the same for everybody, obviously, right? And that's what I love about this podcast and our audience and just the world as a whole is that there are so many ways to interpret the same instance. We're all looking at the same sunset, but it's going to bring up a different thought in me than it might bring up in you, especially if we're strangers. Like I might be thinking about something completely different than you would be thinking about at the same time that we're watching the same event. So, in this 2020, we've all had our different ways to take what's happened since January 1st, 2020 to now, when March hit and there was so much uncertainty and things like that. But for me and for what I see for the country and and again, this is going to vary because it's not the truth for everybody, but and for some people it might be spiked and then went back to normal. But for so many of us, there's been so much personal growth that's happened in this last 12 months.
Yeah.
Even aside from the pandemic, but once the pandemic hit, once the uprising started, there's been so much like introspection, so much like letting go of certain aspects of our personalities, so much solidifying other aspects of our personalities, so much discovering different aspects of our personalities, that I just, I'm kind of off on a tangent in this moment, but, as far as 2020 goes for me, as far as this podcast and these 20 episodes that we've been getting into, it's been just really a great time of self-discovery and self-reflection. And I'm very excited for where that is going to take me going forward, to know thyself a little bit more.
Yeah, certainly a theme of the podcast, if you've been, an avid listener or following, is getting to know oneself, and that really, may be our greatest project. On this earth, maybe not. It sounded profound.
I think it's absolutely profound, like myself. Whoa. No, because it's like
mind blown.
You spend, like, what better way to spend a life other than getting to know yourself and the way that you operate, and then bouncing into and off of people who are also getting to know themselves. And it's just, for me, having these conversations with you is the perfect example of it. It's just a beautiful gift of the universe to be able to sit next to somebody and go through the process of understanding our individual selves better.
Yeah. And I love that too. And another thing that I've loved about this process in particular, and whether or not people realize it, is this whole journey, this podcast, we didn't sit down and write an outline, week by week. There's many ways to do a podcast. So maybe, some folks might say, okay, we're going to do 20 episodes and here's the title of each one and here's what we're going to cover. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. But literally what I love about this process was that it just flowed week to week. And so for those of you that may not know, Mujib and I have been lucky enough to one of the few people I see on a regular basis because we train together safely. I'll put that out there. But we, a few days before we record, we're like, what do you want to talk about? What are you feeling this week? What are you feeling right now? And that has literally been our creative process of just kind of sharing, like, where are you at? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? And it's been so easy, and I so appreciate that. And not that necessarily because it's easy, it's good, or the other way around, but it has not felt, we haven't really had writer's block, or it hasn't felt like I'm pushing a boulder uphill and, oh God, what are we going to talk about? We usually find that this podcast could be 3 or 4 hours. Right. And so, I think you guys who have been listening have seen sort of this just fun back and forth that we have, this, natural kind of conversational communication. It's just been really fun. So I've just loved, I'm gushing now, but I really have enjoyed these moments.
Yeah, I was going to use the same word as far as gushing goes, because it's I think that right now the listener can understand you're in for a gushing episode, because there's so much appreciation here. I appreciate you so much, Sarah, in this conversation. I appreciate y'all, the listeners, so much for your feedback and for listening and for just kind of asking yourself a lot of the questions that we're posing out there. It's a lot of strong energy to put into the world to investigate ourselves collectively as we're here around this speaker, or around this microphone, or however it is that you're taking this experience in, right? Yeah. I'm lucky enough to experience it in the moment right now as I'm speaking. It's just it's such a highlight to my life to be able to take part in this process, because also it's one thing that has been a pretty common theme of this podcast is that these things, they might not look exactly the same through everybody's window, but we're all doing them. We're all trying to figure out how to do this thing a little bit better, or how to discard this thing that's not serving us so well. And we're all looking for tools to figure out how to do that, and even the most successful, holistically successful person that is listening to this podcast right now or involved in it is still daily looking for the tools to move through this world as their highest self. You know what I mean? And that goes from, if you haven't decided what you're going to do for today, or if you've got a 5-year plan, or if you had a 3-year plan that completely fell apart and now you're adapting and repositioning yourself to it. We're all going through some facet of that. And so to get to sit here, we have a lot in common, but there's also a lot of our differences that come together and make that kind of balanced conversation that we're able to have.
Yeah, which is just so awesome. And you put it in these terms, what a gift to be able to just do this kind of work, just to have conversation. I so appreciate and privilege these moments. To me, it's just all of the intellectual conversation, just the creativity, the energy behind it. It's just awesome. And if this helped to spur, people having conversations, whether amongst themselves or within their family units or friends or whatever it brought up for people, hopefully some of that happened, I think another theme of the 20 episodes is self-empowerment, and really, I think we are very similar in that I think we both believe that part of our mission and purpose and work is to empower other people. And whether our conversations help foster that or enable that for people, that's great. And we enrich ourselves by doing that as well, and I think, it's not entirely altruistic. And what I mean by that is, it's not 100% selfless. We are absolutely benefiting from this relationship and from these conversations. But of course, the hope and the purpose is that others are as well. So I think that's important.
And it reminds me of the early conversation that we had around starting this podcast and how much of this process is an outlet for the energy that we derive and put into our professional practices, right? Like, I don't see as many people in 2020 as I saw in 2019. I didn't see a way to speak to as many people as I wanted to be able to speak to in 2020. And that sparked this idea from you to me that we could sit down and have this conversation with our base of people that would listen to us and typically look to us for some type of guidance in one way or another. And it doesn't have to be like, it's not the same guidance as me telling you what number of sets to do and how many reps to do and what weight to use. It's not the same. But that's the reps and the sets and the other variables aren't why you come to me in the first place. You know what I mean? The exercise variables you could get online. We come to each other in these professional situations because of all of these different aspects of why this person speaks to my soul. So to have this opportunity to also speak to you all, the listener, because that's what we want to do. We want to be able to talk to these people. We want to be able to get this message out there to them, even if it is just like, let me tell you my background story. Or, you know, let me share with you how I communicate with my loved ones. Or, you know, those different things.
What I love too, you know, looking back and you know, anybody can go back through the first 19 episodes, is that I really think that we didn't leave anything off limits.
Right.
And I love that. You know, there wasn't this internal or external censorship that's going on. Again, I really pride myself with a explicit lyrics rating on iTunes.
Fuck yeah.
That was like the highlight when we got into iTunes, and I was like, explicit lyrics, let's go. But I love that. And, you know, and again, not having a script, there's no piece of paper in front of us right now where we're like, okay, we got to touch this on that and don't talk about that. And I love that authentic, organic nature. And, you know, we just went in a lot of different directions, and our listeners will know that. I mean, you know, all over the place.
Right.
And still so many avenues we could continue to go. And, you know, this is certainly something I want to continue to do, and even elaborate on some of the topics that maybe only got a few minutes of airtime that could literally be entire episodes.
Right.
So.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm happy
right?
to continue.
We're having a planning meeting right now is what's happening. But I don't know, what was, I don't know, like a highlight reel for you, or maybe a particular episode, anything that like really jumps out at you, or one that you go back to? Because I listen to them. Right. We listen to our own episodes.
You know, I feel like some of these most recent episodes have been some of the ones that have hit me the heaviest.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I think that there are levels to measure it by, right? So like my funnest episode was kind of around like favorite things.
Yeah.
That was a fun episode.
Yeah.
It was like a really lighthearted episode, but then also like the music episode was also very, very fun for my soul in that way. The failure episode was definitely, that one is still I'm still processing so much from that episode. Even like today, like, you know, I was telling you that I showed up 3 hours early, you know, and I'm like, I have to process that in my own mind. Like, what do these things mean? So that episode definitely stands out for that, because there's so much of that like, disclosure. I used to beat myself up a lot about things that I did wrong, or stuff that like like mistakes that I made, or if I showed up late to something, or, you know, I would always be critiquing myself, but not constructively, like really kind of like just kind of like not quite demeaning myself, but always thinking that I wasn't stepping up enough. So that a lot of that energy got processed in that episode about failure and just like self-reflection and self-acceptance. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, that one is the most profound episode for me, for sure.
Yeah, I felt like we often got deep in a lot of episodes, but that one definitely, that hit. You know? And I hope it hit for other people as well.
Right.
You know?
What about yourself? Yeah.
Well, I'm like,
Yeah, I
I'm
was
trying to
gonna
pull
say,
up the list here. I'm talking about we go without notes here, so
I love the communication episode for sure.
yeah.
This last episode last week or 2 weeks ago, that one was, again, when we talk about like what are fulfilling conversations to have with people, talking about ways that we communicate best
Yeah.
with the world I could talk about that for hours and hours and hours, because it's so insightful to hear about somebody else's process when communicating their thoughts or their intentions or any other thing.
Yeah, and like so many things, it's, knowing that you're not alone. And one of the things that the communication episode brought up for me in particular was, hearing about another couple's, ways of communication or communication hang-ups or whatever. It's, it kind of makes you realize like, oh, okay, yeah, seems to be sort of a universal struggle.
Right.
Definitely, I think maybe we've all been in a place like, oh my God, is it just me or am I, what's going on here? And also realizing that communication is also affected by so much greater on that cosmic level too, if that's something that you believe in. And I do. I'm just kind of like looking back at our discography here.
Right. This heavy shit. I forgot about the loss and grief episode. Jeez.
I know. That was an important one. I loved our Written in the Stars episode. That was really profound for me to kind of talk about that. We were even just talking about, astrology, cosmology, this just prior to hitting record. So that was definitely, the grief episode. I loved the Imagining the Future episode. That was kind of looking ahead.
Right.
And I mean, just we've gone through a lot of different things. It's, if people talk about binge watching Netflix, y'all can binge listen if you've got a long road trip coming up. I don't know who's going anywhere. But there's a lot. There's a lot to chew on.
It's interesting to look at the dates of the episodes and try to coordinate that with what would have been going on in the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
And what we choose to have a conversation about in that week or
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people can sort of cross-reference like maybe what was in the headlines or what was going on, because this podcast is truly a reflection of kind of the here and now and what we were going through. And, obviously, discussing the pandemic, discussing COVID. I mean, this is just very much this is a 2020 podcast. This is a 2020 creation. This came out of COVID. I mean, this is always something I wanted to do, but certainly it seemed like, okay, now's the time.
Right.
Like the time has presented itself to do this. So it's, it's very much a reflection of where we're in. The trust episode.
right.
Also, and I should say on air publicly how Mujib does the write-ups of the episode, and I love them. They're fabulous.
Awesome.
His synopsis of it, just like he gets it completely. I've never had any input or editing power or anything. It's just great. So, I love the write-ups. So,
That's fun.
That's just awesome. But the confidence and self-worth. I'm in the process of mentoring 2 Winooski High School students right now through some senior projects. And I think I can't remember if I told you this, but I've assigned some podcasts for them to listen to. But it was just really great to, in spite of the explicit lyrics rating, this is certainly suitable for high school students. And it was just really great to to get to assign an episode and, see what a 16, 17-year-old is drawing out of this stuff. And this particular student, I assigned the nitty-gritty of entrepreneurship because he was interested in perhaps starting a fitness business at some point in his life. And there was this nugget of hope because he latched on to the story of you not having a car at one point, prior to North Country Kettlebells or en route to that. And then kind of hearing your success story, he was like, okay, I can do this.
Right.
But it's really cool, when you actually hear from somebody that, is 25 years our junior, which is crazy. Kind of listening and just saying like, okay, yeah, like I can do that. Like, I mean, I love that.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
I'm like, absolutely. I mean, then that is the point too, you know, to expose our humanity, our possibility, our potential. I love that.
Yeah, and the nitty-gritty of it, because
Yeah.
you know, as you've listened to this podcast and as we've had this conversation and learned more about each other, it's one thing that is true in our lives is that it's been a windy road to get to where we've gotten, and there've been full stop turnaround moments, you know. What that really makes me think of is this reality that I hit in like 2016. So, you know, 2014 was a year where a bunch of major changes happened in my life, and I decided, like, you know, I really have to change directions with how I'm approaching life and the things that I'm focusing on. What's important to me has to, like, I have to bring my perspectives in line with what I actually want for myself, and for my future and for my family. And, you know, in my mind, like, yes, I'm on the new road, you know, and
Yeah.
but 2016 hits, and you know, my life hits again this little snag, and I'm like, holy shit, like everything is, it's not exactly as I thought it was gonna be. Like when I made the decision to change, there were all these initial, like almost like gains, you know, like I had this initial adaptation to my new life, and everything seemed to be rolling right that way, like multiple trips to see my family, and you know, I'm there for my grandma's 90th birthday, and then I'm there again for my brother's birthday. Like it was amazing that first year making those changes. 2016 hits, and there was a bit of a stall out that happened, and it wasn't like a stall in my intentions or my progression. It was just like a real aha moment, and in that moment, and just when I said hard stop, it made me think about this and made it worth saying on the podcast, because it's probably going to be helpful thing for everybody to hear. In that moment, I realized those hard stop moments in life are literally, like you say, stop the train, you know, it's literally like a train stopping. The train is flying down the tracks, it's stopping, I'm going totally in this direction, I'm fully committed to it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, that's not the direction I need to be going. Stop this train, pull the emergency stops. The train stops. When that happens though, all the luggage falls down, somebody falls over, maybe something gets hurt, so on and so forth. Like everything is tossed up and disheveled.
Yeah.
And then we have to turn the train back. So
Yeah.
now I got to start going back, because I realized that I made a wrong turn way the fuck back there. So now I got to get all the way back there before I can make this turn to go in the direction that I was planning on going in the whole time. So that whole like hard stop moment, that the train changing directions, I had this plan and now my plan's not going to happen that way, but I'm excited about the way that my plan is going to go. It still takes that time for everything to catch back up, you know, because I have to turn back around. I have to pick everything back up. I have to tend to this wound. I have to reestablish these relationships, you know, to take it out of the metaphor. Like I have to reposition myself. I have to re-engage with what I'm doing. Like my orientation was different. I was thinking about going left, but I realized I have to go right.
Yeah.
So now I have to go back.
Yeah.
So I can go right again. You know, it's that it just brought that up for me.
You are speaking to my 2020. I mean, like, verbatim. That's really how March of 2020 felt for this kid.
Oh, wow.
I was thinking, I was doing a little reflecting earlier in the week, you know, this being the last week of 2020, just to put a timestamp on it. Today is December 29th of 2020. And earlier this week, I was thinking, you know, as somebody who, I call myself a validation junkie, or has always been that way. Like, you know, I think we talked about this in other episodes. Like, you know, I was always working for that A report card and, you know, this accolade and this award and this best of, and, you know, kind of chasing those things, because to me that was validation, that external validation of success. And 2019 was, you know, on paper, you know, the most successful year for me and my business, and in, you know, in real terms, or, you know, how we might think of, you know, breaking sales records, like doing all kinds of stuff, and feeling good about that. But then I remember January 1, 2020, thinking, how do I keep this up? You know, I have to beat 2019. Like, that's always my mentality, like, best of. Okay, we did this in 2019. Now we got to get the next rung on the ladder. And I remember the first couple of months of 2020 being like, okay, I'm not, you know, and I would make sales targets just based on like previous months. And, you know, I own my own business, so it's not like I had someone at the top telling me, you know, you're going to hit these sales goals. I do it to myself. And, you know, we get into February and I'm not hitting my mark. I'm like, uh-oh, February 2020 isn't what February 2019 was. All right, I got to change, I got to do something. And, you know, not that I was chasing the dollar, but I was chasing this idea of just beating myself. Like, better, like besting all the time. And at what cost? In my own, like, just anxiety or workaholicness. And, you know, it was playing on sort of, it's like oftentimes I think what our best assets are also our worst assets, you know, kind of depending on how we're caring for ourselves. And then, you know, going into March and then all of a sudden 2 weeks into March, it's like the rug gets pulled out. And then I'm like, okay, well, just rip up everything I was stressed out about. It's just like, okay, so it's pretty clear that 2020 is not going to beat 2019. I mean, that was clear within, you know, very early. And then it really took a complete, again, overused word, pivot, rethinking, reimagination. Like, this is not going to go like any other year. And recognizing that early, and we talked about this early on, like, okay, I'm getting on the next bus because I'm not gonna do things the old way. That's gone. So what do I need to learn right now? How am I gonna move forward? So forget about all these other like benchmarks and sales goals and all that other stuff, okay? Because that's gone. And what can I do now, or how can I reimagine this community and make choices differently with, you know, prioritize the community and so then from day one it was always the health, the safety of this community. We're not going to reopen. Forget about it. Forget about any of the economic reasons why someone's telling you, oh, you got to be open, you got to do this, you got to do that. Well, screw it. So, you know, that the mindset and the goal shifted 100% to like, how can we keep this community alive in a safe way? And, you know, and the lessons learned from that and moving forward and just shifting directions. And it's just I'm grateful for that because, you know, this year economically it is what it is. I'm lucky enough that I'm still in a position to put food on my table and I have a shelter over my, you know, I have those things. I have someone to go home to at the end of the day. That didn't change. A lot of other stuff, sure, there is a dumpster fire, but I have what I need, and I know what I need to do to move ahead. And so I do feel very lucky and blessed for that reason, so we move on and didn't get caught up in sort of that old framework.
Right.
There's a new framework. So, you know, I'm grateful for that. Yeah, the train fucking stopped. I mean, it sparks on the track, you know, and it's like, okay. And then also thinking like, oh man, like I was so worried for the first 10 weeks of the year. Well, and then that blew up.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, not that you know, other worries came in for sure.
Totally.
It's not like, okay, I'm living a worry-free life. It's been a tough 9 months.
Yeah.
You know, we're chipper and we're positive, but it's been a tough 9 months. Let's be real.
Right. This has been the hardest year of my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, as far as like flat out, actually, fucking nothing. My relationships have been. It's been more important that I stand. It's like when the stakes get so high that you can't make a fucking mistake now. You know? And like, sure, it's different for everybody. Like I'm Mujib Khaliq. Like I'm unless you've lived my life exactly how I've lived, then we don't have the same exact story. But you know, like this has been a real moment of show up and fucking show out, man. Like it's I've had to, my faith has never been tested more. My sense of just, this is something you have to deal with, and like something that you don't know, like my grandmother passed away in this year, right? So like my grandma passed away in early November, like second week of November. And so, like I wasn't able to go to her funeral, like we watched her funeral on Zoom, like my sister's in Seattle, I'm in Vermont. And even when they panned around the funeral home, it was like everybody was distanced. My aunt didn't have her daughter sitting right next to her. My brother wasn't sitting right next to my mom. Like, so, early on in the pandemic, and my grandma was 93, she died comfortably at home. Thankfully, that's how her life ended in the hands of her daughter. Because early in the pandemic, it struck me how many people were passing away without that connection to their family, and still to this day, how many people have to now transition without the connection with their loved ones, and how many people are going through right now through the pandemic not knowing if they're going to be able to see their loved ones again. So it's been this year of like, there's no sugarcoating it. Here's how it is, and you have to eat this pie,
Yeah.
and like, you can't even not eat it. You have to eat it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's that. And so the person who I am going into 2021 brings all of that with me. Like all of the resolve, all of the fortitude that's been built in 2020, all of the definitive, like, I'm putting my stake in the ground, like I mean this, I have recommitted to this life that I'm choosing to live, because 2020 offered me an opportunity to change everything. You don't have to try to keep this going. You can stop. You can fall back. Like, you don't have to try at all. There's no reason to keep trying, actually. Or
Yeah, actually. Yeah, it's almost like, that scene in The Matrix with the red pill and the blue pill. It's kind of felt like you have a choice, which road do you want to go down, and now, again, sort of speaking like blanket statement, now that you know what you know, now you can't unsee certain things. You can't unlearn certain things. Like, there has been, people talking about portals being open, but for real, 2020 is just like, all right, are you stepping in or are you stepping out?
Right.
Because you do have this choice. And yeah, it's just, you've heard this, like, you've got to do better now. I'm choosing wisely the people that are now in my circle. Let's put it this way. So obviously the pandemic has forced on us this idea of being really careful about who we let in to our circle, our pod, our lives. And in a way, I appreciate that moving forward, when it is safe to widen the circle, I'm a little bit more discerning, not in like I don't know if you're like infected kind of a way, but just like, I don't know, a little bit more careful in a way, like just being really intentional about the people and the energy that you surround yourself with. That's what I mean, in terms of, being attracted to other people's vibration and what they're on. And I don't mean like only hanging out with people that think the way you think, because that's a cult, and that's not what I'm interested in either. But just people that are there to bring out, your authentic self. And whether your authentic self in that moment is someone that you're really, it doesn't necessarily mean like your best, most positive, most like, that's not what I mean. Because I feel like that's also like a false message. But your authentic, real self, if the people that, like, if I were to sit here and we were to talk and either one of us were to start crying right now, That's an authentic interaction. Like, I don't have to hide who I am in front of you, and vice versa.
Right.
Like, I choose to have those relationships moving forward, and not that I was never into the fake bullshit anyway, but like now even more so, it's like, just get out of my sight.
Right.
Yeah. I want to be able to, if you have to rage with your people, rage with your people. If you need to cry, if you want to dance, if you want to sing, like, I just want to be around people that will accept all of these facets. It was a really long way to get out what I was trying to get out there, but
It's perfectly articulate. I think that discernment in what we choose to put our energy to is going to be one of the most important things going forward.
Yeah.
Because, something that we said early on in our conversations was like, if there's a line in the sand, like, choose this way or that way, the line is so much wider now. It's not like a hairpin line. Like, it's a gorge. It's like, do you support equality and social justice or not?
Right.
And maybe somebody doesn't think about it at all. That's fine too. Like, that's obviously, you're able to be forgiven about stuff like that. But like, in this 2020 year has been like, is this important to you? Like, is it important to you that there's this much injustice in this world? It's like every generation we get a chance to unfold a little bit more. Like, we talk about the idea of being the caterpillar cocooning and then becoming the butterfly. That's happening individually, it's happening nationally, it's happening globally. Like, if we take it back to even just like, so I'm listening to this account of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, right? And even in that generation, like antebellum America, you have this option. What side of this are you going to be on right now? Like, are you going to be indifferent? Like, it doesn't matter to you that some people are literally people and being treated like literally animals, like worse than dogs, you know what I mean? Like, somebody's treating this person worse than they treat like a feral dog, you know what I mean? Or are you going to notice that this is going on and go the other way, And all the way in 2020, you see the same thing. Like, are you as a person who's watching the news, like, are we going to care more about like a dog that somebody shot, or are we going to care more about like a father or mother or brother or person that somebody shot? You know what I mean? And like, that's those are kind of hard polls, right? But even on more narrow polls, like, are we going to pay attention to what's in front of us or not? Like, and I love it because it literally is on every single level. Like, our relationships, are you gonna care what's going on between me and you? Because if you're not, I don't really know if it's like, I don't know how much time there is left, or I don't know if the rug is gonna get pulled out from under me, or any number of reasons. Like, I can't afford to not be on the same page with the people that I'm sitting across from. Like, if I'm talking about day and you're talking about night, and both of us are talking about 2:00, we're gonna meet up, I'm fucked now. It's too late to be wrong on that.
Right.
If I show up here at 2 a.m. thinking that that's what you meant, well, there's a lot at stake to get here at 2 a.m. I've risked my life to get here at 2 a.m. I better understand that we're talking the same language. We mean the same thing. That's just a simple kind of analogy around it. To put it more concretely and bluntly, like, I'm married. For me and my partner, like, we have to be talking about the same direction that we're going in.
Yeah.
Because if we're speaking a different language and her right, and we're facing each other and she's talking about going right, but I think she's talking about going left, because we haven't taken the clear time to communicate, then we're going to end up in two different places.
Yeah.
And for people that we love, I don't want to end up in two different places with the people I love. I want to be around the people that I love. I want to be attracted to the people that I'm supposed to love later in life. Like, I want that. And that's kind of what 2020 is reminding me to think about going forward into 2021. And it feels strong going into 2021 with that in mind. And to have 19 episodes and now 20th episode to just keep on reminding me of these aspects of what it is that's important to me, or what it is that I actually hold dear, or where my perspective was in this last 6 months. This, again, it's just a gift. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's what I was talking about just before we started recording was the fact that, you know, how lucky we are to have this oral history of this relationship and this time period. Like, what a time capsule to look back on, which is just really cool. And, you know, both of us do keep journals, and, you know, it's always fascinating for me, you know, if I find a journal from 5 years or 10 years ago and I'm like, oh my God, who was that person? You know, it'll be so interesting, you know, in 2030 to have this digital archive, you know. And I'm certainly hopeful that I'll look back and even if I don't necessarily recognize the person, that I'm be really proud of that person. You know, okay, yeah, that was pretty good. I was on my way, you know, wherever we may be going. But also, you know, I think a major theme of the last 19 odd episodes for us in particular has always been, you know, this process of becoming. Something like we've kind of always traveled back to. You know, who are we in this moment, which we obviously have a record of. We have that snapshot. And then where are we going? What do we want to be? And I think back to the this or that episode. And the last question, which kind of hung us both up, you know, who you are now, or who, you know, who you're becoming or who you're meant to be or whatever. And being really caught between that, because I think both of us very similarly are very proud of who we are in this moment. I think I can say that. I think you could say the same, right? But I'm also, I do see so much more, and I'm excited about that growth trajectory. So yeah, it's just kind of keeping that eye on and willing to do the work, because I think we both know that we're not just going to float up to this next level. Right. And you know, and anybody who's on this journey, you know how hard it is. You know it takes work. And if you are doing the work of self-reflection and digging deep, or if you've been fortunate enough to go to therapy or be able to work on thyself, it is hard work, and probably some of the hardest work you'll ever do. You know, to even just be able to like look in the mirror and kind of unpack what the fuck's going on. Right. You know, to face that. So, you know, kudos to everybody out there that is doing that hard work, but that is where the growth happens, and you know, it's worth every step of the way, sort of every proverbial scar, you know, it's worth that work, and it's painful work, but it's worthy, you know? Totally. So it is exciting, you know, just for a second was like, oh man, 2030. What?
Well, it makes me think, like, because when looking back over journals, it's so many seeds are planted in a moment of recording, right? It's so many paths are started out on, so many threads are caught, you know, in that moment. It's exciting to think in 2030, like, what ideas sparked from these conversations, like to look back and to be like, oh damn, like that's the impetus, like that's when I started saying that, or that's when I started thinking like that. Like, I'm so far on this path that I forget sometimes what sparked it. You know, like what was the initial aha, like you can't do this anymore, you have to now go to that next thing. And I think that that's going to be the beautiful record of 2020, is that for a lot of people, for a lot of us, it was just plain as day. This was that moment. Like it happened at some point in 2020 when I said, I have to do something different right now. I have to reposition, or I have to re-examine myself. And maybe it's not even do something different. Maybe it's do the same thing with more intention. Maybe it's add an element to my daily practice. Maybe it's add a extra phone call to a loved one, or it's to take that extra 5 minutes to give my loved one a little bit more space to speak. You know what I mean? But I think that we're all going to be able to look back at 2020 and say, that's when that started. Like, that's where that clicked or something like that. So always, I kind of think about that a lot, is like, what right now is my life actually foreshadowing, And I was thinking about, because, this is a recap episode. So I'm thinking to myself, like, well, my birthday is January 31st. Like, where was I my last birthday? What was I doing? And what does that tell me about the trajectory that I had been on at that time before March hit and things shifted,
Yeah.
Where was my mind going? Like, we were in Puerto Rico, we came back from Puerto Rico. What were we planning on doing next?
Right.
That had to stop and repause and reposition and switch. And, a lot of like, is this still important? Is that still important? Yes, no. Or, what are we going to take going forward? If you can only take so much emotionally or physically, what are you going to take going forward?
Oh, yeah. I'm just getting this visual of, like, you have one bag.
Yeah.
What are you going to put in that
What
bag?
do you put in it?
And I think if we, just kind of speaking of, at least in Western culture, kind of the accumulation of stuff. And I don't know if other folks have gone through this. I'm actually going through quite a purge right now because I'm having to vacate the physical location of my spin studio. And so it's meaning, just kind of get rid of a bunch of stuff. But I'm not sad about that. It kind of feels like you got one bag. Like, what are you going to take? Well, I'm going to take my speakers because I really need those. I'm sort of cultivating this, like, what's really important. Like, and actually it's a really interesting exercise because if we could all sort of do that, whether it's in your professional life or just your personal life, like, you have one bag. Like, the Titanic is sinking. Like, what's that one? But you get one bag. You can take it on the lifeboat. What are you going to put in there? And then that is truly the most important shit in your life. What do you treasure? And it's just kind of fun. Like, well, I'm definitely taking the speakers, I'm taking the mixer. That's just like a given, right? But yeah, and that right there. And that's maybe all you really need.
Right.
And for those of you out there that do live in small spaces, and you realize, like, you really can't accumulate a whole hell of a lot unless you got a storage unit, which maybe you do. But yeah, and that, the most important things too, which I usually find are the people, are the relationships in the life, because the stuff is just stuff. And, I've moved my business now 3 times in 8 years, and, there will be a 4th iteration. And I've never gotten too emotionally attached to any physical place. And I'm good with that. It's almost like I was saying to someone the other day that either, like, my constitution is just right for this, like, and I'm not saying it's easy to sort of pick up and restart and move and kind of figure all that out, but if there's anybody that can do it, I guess I'm the person to do it. I can adapt. I've adapted that way. So, but in sort of that shape-shifting nature, like, I just don't get too wedded to stuff and things. And, whether that's good or bad, I'm not saying that's how everybody should be, but it's just that's how I've been able to sort of navigate the ups and downs of the last 8 years of my particular life. So it's just kind of interesting to think, I got that one bag and that, I need my bike and my music. Set me up anywhere. Put me on Church Street. Put me in the subway. I'll make it work. And I guess a recording device and Wi-Fi. Those are, but it's kind of interesting to think about that.
Yeah, I love that.
What would you take?
Oh.
Deep question. We got a few minutes left.
Because for
put
me,
him on the
it's like
spot.
I went to a place where it was like, it's like I immediately thought of my family. Like, I thought of my wife and my child and our little nuclear unit of, like, they mean so much to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's hard for me to even fathom how much they actually mean to me. Like, the the person that they make me, you know? And when I look at the things in my life that I would take with me, they have to make me the person who I'm intending myself to be. You know what I mean? Like, if that thing doesn't serve that best version of myself, or that most authentic version of myself, I should say, I don't need that, you know? I love those posters. I don't need them. You know? You know, if I can speak about NCK Studio, like, if I had to pack up and leave right now, like, what am I going to bring with me? There are 3 kettlebells in that room that I'll bring with me. And if the rest of them, they can float away if they need to. You know what I mean? There's a couple things in there right now that I would bring with me, but for the most part, like, I think that, I don't know, I think that's why we get along so well, because I'm also very much built like that myself. Is like, I don't, give me a backpack to hold these things in, and we'll keep rocking, because I know that at some point in time, this thing is going to level back out, and this boat's going to hit shore, and I'll be able to keep it moving like that. And, you know, back to really early episode. And if not, I don't have fucking anything to worry about anyway. Like, if I did bring enough and the boat sinks, I'm fucking good.
Oh my God, that is so it's funny. My partner Dariush said something really similar, as I was having a moment of self-doubt, and I said, well, oh shit, well, what if this happens? And he's like, well, it's not gonna matter, because we're gonna be dead. But okay, I guess you're right. We'll end on a morbid note there. But yeah, it's true. Yeah. But
and that's when, you know, one thing, well, I'm about to go deep. This is why we have to have an episode 21, right? Because
we're not done.
Like, for me, I don't know, I really do think that we have no idea how real it gets. You know, and I almost said we don't have any idea how good it gets, but we also don't have any idea how bad it gets, how mundane it gets, how beautiful, how ugly. Like, we don't know how real this life gets. And every year it's going to tell us it gets way realer than that. You know, and 2020 did that. It let us know, like, there's a way high watermark for what you can deal with. You know,
I just got goosebumps.
It's way, way, way realer than what you thought. You know, and take that with you into 2021 now. You know, and into the rest of your life. Like, you can handle a lot, actually.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. That was boom, mic drop. And I definitely, okay, so that we can, that is really heavy. I don't even know what to say. I feel like we have to wrap it up now. But this is not a farewell episode, so let's throw that out there. This was just a year in review. This was our recap. So, you know, raise your hand if you want more. Oh, I see you. We're going to keep this up, worry not. I'm excited about it. And takeaway from today, surround yourself with people that bring out your authentic self. And replace that with best, because I feel like that there's such a pressure that best somehow means like always on, always positive, like, you know. But authentic self, I really like that, because that's that range of emotion, and people that you can be your realest real with. You know, those are the people that get to go in the luggage bag. The luggage bag fits people too.
Yes.
Oh man. Well, I wish everybody a happy New Year.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy New Year.
We made it. We almost made it. I don't want to jinx it. There's still a couple days. A lot can happen in 72 hours. But we're on our way to 2021. And thank you, Mujib, for the last 6 months.
Oh, thank you so much,
which
Sarah.
have been awesome. And, you know, we'll figure out what we're going to talk about next week when next week comes. So thank you guys so much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.